So I want to make this quick video on what I think is a really important way of learning jazz vocabulary, and it happens to be a way of learning jazz without using much, if any, music theory. So I think theory is super important for giving names to different things like scales and arpeggios and triads and all that stuff. But I think the mistake that we make a lot of times when we're in pursuit of expanding our vocabulary as improvisers is we give ourselves more things to think about rather than more things to hear when we're in the moment and improvising. So I think the focus when you're expanding your improvisational vocabulary should be to connect everything to your ears. And some people will do this through like writing solos on tunes or solo transcription or deep listening, or even just like brute force repetition of lines and language and stuff like that, all of which I think is super important. But I think probably the most direct way to get language into your ears is to sing it or vocalize it in some kind of way. In this video, I'll be whistling a lot of lines just because I think it's easier to do that with like range of jazz vocabulary and that kind of thing. So if an idea is really connected to your ears and you're able to sing it consistently and without thinking about, what the next note is and what that leap is and all that kind of stuff, that just means that you really own it and you can apply it in a lot of different contexts without even thinking about like what harmony it goes over, what scale it's using, and again, like what the scale degrees are that it's outlining, that kind of thing. It really creates just this super natural connection to from your ears to the instrument, which is ultimately like what you want with everything that you get into your playing. Now, a lot of times when you're, learning jazz, you hear people use the phrase "play what you hear" a lot, and I think if you can sing the phrases that you're playing, then you're playing what you're hearing. So what happens in practice usually is you'll hear a bass note or you hear a chord voicing and you'll be able to respond with an appropriate melody that you're like pre-hearing, and that pre-hearing is going to consist of a lot of preparation. So, playing what you hear doesn't mean that you're just like coming up with things out of thin air or whatever, but it means that you're able to call upon all of these other things that you've connected to your ears already. So obviously it's difficult to make sure that everything you play is something that you hear. And I really don't think that that should be something that you think about too much when you're in the moment and improvising, because that's just going to create like roadblocks and get in your way. But the idea is that this practice creates a foundation level in your playing that makes it so that you can approach pretty much any set of chord changes, any tempo or whatever, and you'll have stuff that you can call upon when the moment comes. Singing ideas also eventually makes it a lot easier to actually approach thinking about things in the moment. So, there are certain things that I think I've gotten into my playing just through like I mentioned, like thinking about or writing solos and, planning out like specific moments to use ideas. But I think that that process would have been a lot more difficult if I hadn't already had vocabulary that was connected to my ears and that I could sing. So I usually think about this as a type of practical ear training, just because for me, things like solfege or singing intervals weren't super helpful for getting out there and like playing with people and being able to hear things in the moment. That was great for like the classroom and like sight singing melodies and that kind of thing, but not so great for like actually expanding my vocabulary as an improviser. So a couple things that you can do to improve your ears and your improvisational vocabulary without thinking about theory: practice singing ideas without touching the instrument, and then find those ideas on the instrument. So I might give myself like a chord voicing to start. And sometimes I'll also just do this like free without any accompaniment, without thinking about any harmony. But for the sake of this video, I'll just play D major 7 or any voicing really, and I'll whistle something. So right? I'm not even going to think about like what that is exactly. Like I'm, going up a melodic cell off the 5th degree, and then I'm doing this chromatic approach from the 7th to the 5th or whatever. I'm just thinking about it as a melody, and I'm just grabbing it on the fretboard. And the more that you do that, the easier it becomes, and the more you can do it in real time with things that you're hearing, maybe even for the first time. So the next thing that you can do to improve your jazz playing without any theory is to sing the bass notes of tunes. So this was something that I was doing a lot even before I was thinking about connecting any vocabulary to my ears just kind of as like a party trick. Like I would sing the bass notes to like giant steps, and like one of my friends would sing the melody over it. So, I might give myself like a starting point. Boo de da doo dee da dee da doo de dee da de da da do dee da dee da ba dee da bo dee da. All right, and then I make sure that I end up in the same spot when I get to the top of the form. So in that way, the bass line becomes like a secondary melody for you, right? And it makes it so that anything you already are hearing, even without knowing that you're hearing vocabulary, you'll be able to connect it to the sound of the harmony because you have that underpinning of the bass line working in your favor. So, I don't do a whole lot of like singing arpeggios and that kind of thing. I probably should do more, but you could even do the same sort of exercise with the arpeggios of the tune. Boo-da boo-ba, boo-da boo-da, ba-da-doo-da, boo-da-doo-da, boo-da-doo-da. Right? And then go through the rest of the tune like that. And again, by adding in the arpeggios, you're just kind of giving yourself like even more harmonic information to draw from when you're improvising. So the things that you play will just kind of automatically be connected to the harmony. Another thing that you can do to improve your improv without thinking about music theory is to sing solos over backing tracks. If you're new to jazz, I would recommend doing like a blues or a jazz blues progression. But for this example, I'll do The Changes of Confirmation by Charlie Parker, and I'll try to put in chord changes accompaniment in post. So I'll do it like medium tempo, not too fast. So I got to the B section there, but you get the idea. So all of those melodies that I whistled are things that, I can play on the guitar. But also as I was whistling, I was thinking of where I would play them on the guitar. And that can kind of help with, accuracy, like in terms of pitch and that kind of thing. And then as an extra part of that practice, you could also try, singing something over the backing track, pause the backing track and try to find that idea on the instrument. The last and I think most important thing to do to improve your jazz vocabulary and improv without thinking about music theory is solo transcription. So a lot of times when we think about solo transcription, especially in jazz, I think we talk about writing the solo out and analyzing the lines, and I think all of that is great. But a really great way to improve your ears and your improv very quickly is to practice singing solos. So this is something I would do first with just like really simple, straightforward melodic stuff, nothing too fast, no double time lines, that kind of thing. I might take like a Chet Baker solo, and I'll attach some recommendations in the description below. But I think his solo on It Could Happen to You is a really great starting point. I think Miles Davis on If I Were a Bell is a great starting point, or even solos by Louis Armstrong or Lester Young, because, a lot of the lines are very stepwise. If they're not stepwise, it's like a really logical melodic leap that they're using in the line or whatever. And everything is more or less like pretty inside of the chord changes. So a process that I found pretty useful for singing solos is to pick a solo that I want to study. I'll listen to it like 500 times or 1,000 times or however many times it takes for me to start to create like checkpoints within the solo, so that I can say like, I'm listening to it and I'm like, oh, okay, in about 5 seconds, like the pianist is going to do this little thing and they're comping, and then it's going to, make the soloist respond in this way. Or, oh, I love this line that's coming up here. I love this drum fill that's coming up here. The more of those little checkpoints that you can create, the more you're starting to internalize the sound of the solo. So once you do that, then you should practice transcribing it with your voice, or like with whistling or whatever, like I mentioned before. And this should be kind of the same way that you would normally transcribe with your instrument, so you listen to like one phrase, you pause the recording, you try to sing it rather than finding it on the guitar. So none of this, beginning steps of this is going to include playing the instrument, actually. It's just all connecting it to your ears. So you go a couple seconds at a time, piece the entire solo together in that way, and get it to the point where you can sing the full thing with the recording. You want pretty tight intonation. You want to make sure that you're matching the person's rhythmic feel and their phrasing with your voice, that kind of thing. And then you want to start to distance yourself from the recording. So you want to get it to the point where you can sing the entire thing in the same key, and end up in the same spot at the end without any of the recording at all, right? So you're really making sure that this is like a collection of melodies that you're able to hear away from your instrument, away from, any auditory reference at all. And then from there, you transcribe the solo onto the guitar from your singing. So you take each phrase, go, phrase by phrase at a time, and piece it together. But every time you sing a phrase, you try to find those notes on the instrument. So a good example is in Chet Baker's solo on It Could Happen to You. The first phrase he sings is so I would find that on the guitar. Right, so I've done this solo already, so it's, I know like what fingerings I want to use and what key it's in and everything like that. But you do that process with the entire solo, and then you go back to the recording as a reference, and you start to maybe correct any mistakes that you've made from singing it. That, maybe certain things you just couldn't quite get the leaps right or the intervals right, that kind of thing. And then from there, you're done. You don't have to analyze the solo or anything. Now that solo, that collection of melodies is a part of your playing, even without you knowing it sometimes, and you can draw upon that stuff when you're in the moment improvising. So a common question with solo transcription when you're singing lines and that kind of thing is, what do you do if it gets too fast? Like what if the soloist plays like a double time line or like some flurry of notes that's just insanely fast? I would actually skip over that stuff if you can't like really hear it at your current stage. You might get to the point where, there are like Charlie Parker lines or John Coltrane lines that you can actually sing with pretty, good intonation and pitch and everything like that. The point is not so much to get that double time vocabulary like really tight with the recording, unless maybe you're like a jazz vocalist or something like that, So the idea with the faster lines is the soloists are still, pre-hearing that stuff. But, when you sing something and you can get it like consistent, like I mentioned before, where you don't have to like guess what the next pitch is, and you don't have to like, think about like, oh, I'm going to the fifth here, I'm going to do a leap of a major seventh here and that kind of thing. When you can do that consistently, you can then kind of like muddy up the pitch of the line, and you can kind of just sing the shape or the contour of the line, and you'll know what it is, right? And then from there, it's kind of just like you put it in different subdivisions, or you put it in different tempo ranges and that kind of thing. It's like more so a part of you at that point, and you can kind of do whatever you want with it. So like if I sing something like over G major 7, right? That's not even like super fast, but it's, like kind of at the limit of like how fast I can sing. I heard it, I could hear like the starting point and like the last note of the phrase, and everything in between was just kind of like wiggly shapes that I was trying to sing, right? So it's not like I'm really focused on getting the intonation exactly perfect fast, but it's like, I've done that stuff slow so many times that I can just kind of do the shape or do the contour, like I mentioned. So all of these practices, towards improving your ears and getting more jazz vocabulary into your fingers, will work really well together. Like if you do all of this stuff as part of a practice routine, I guarantee you that you'll like get better and you'll be able to play over tunes without even really thinking about the chord changes. In the time that I've been playing guitar and in the time that I've been playing jazz and improvised music, I would say I've met way more people that can play really well and don't know what they're doing. Like they don't know like what scale all the stuff is coming from or what arpeggios or concepts they're using. Then I've met people that know a lot of theory and can play. So I would place an emphasis on connecting as much as you can to your ears, regardless of what stage you're at and you're playing. This stuff will again will apply to beginners, intermediates, advanced players, whatever. And especially if you're advanced, I would recommend taking things that are already like under your fingers and trying to connect them to your ears through singing, because it's just going to give you like way more ownership over those lines and those concepts. So feel free to leave any questions that you have in the comments section below. I think that covers all of it.